Welcome to the CodePrep Podcast, the podcast that shows you how you can get into tech. Today's guest is Diana Rodriguez. I'm excited to have Diana on our podcast today because she has done so many amazing things. She is the worldwide community organizer for Vue Vixens, who creates training on Vue.js for females at events all over the world. She is the founder of Vue Vixens Argentina. She is also a frequent speaker at tech conferences. Lastly, she is a Google developer expert in web technologies. Like I said, she has done many amazing things. Diana primarily focuses in tech in the DevOps area and back end. She has branched out to being full stack by learning Vue.js. Today, she can share her experience with speaking and what benefit that provides for anyone getting into tech. But more importantly, she can talk about DevOps as a path into tech. She recently started a new job in DevOps. So let's get started with the CodePrep Podcast. Diana, can you tell us about your new job in DevOps and what your daily life is like in that position?
Oh, well, I mean, it's quite a task. DevOps is a little bit of everything. In my case, I'm focusing on infrastructure and security. So I have to make sure that everything is running smoothly. I focus on deployments. I keep intruders away from the sensitive information. I also help out a little bit with QA and testing, just make sure everything runs smoothly. And my job is to automate all these tasks and supervise them. So if everything catches on fire, I'm also responsible to bring it back to life. And it's exciting, man. It's my passion.
Wonderful. So, as a junior DevOps engineer, I will admit that I have selfishly been very excited about this episode. How did you get into DevOps? And there are lots of people that I've spoken to. There's so many ways people find their way here, but what has your journey into this role been like?
Well, I started coding when I was 12. My mom and dad were a bit jaded about the fact that I was a bit too hyper. And after fiddling around with computers, I wasn't satisfied. So I actually started taking projects to do networking and to do some backup servers. So, those racks actually make me happy. And that was my first introduction to infrastructure. Then, I explored the security area when I was 16, and it was exciting for me as well. And about 10 years ago, I decided it was what I wanted to do. Back then we were known as sysadmins, and there's a cool meetup in Argentina for sysadmins called Sys Army. So for me, I was part of that system administrators army. We had to do a lot more back then. Nowadays, it's so much easier with all these automation tools and all these amazing little gadgets and smaller servers and the cloud. We don't even have to, get into any server rooms anymore.
So you mentioned about the cloud. How has that changed DevOps and the back end arena of what companies are using and their applications? Is this something that is the future of tech? And is it something that you recommend for somebody that is looking to get into tech to look at learning more about the cloud area?
Well, more than the future is actually a reality. I don't really see any more companies having on-prem servers, due to security. It's easier to just give that load to those who can handle it. as well as, repairing the physical infrastructure. And the big companies I work with are sort of deprecating their on-prem services, kinda. No, I mean, with a few exceptions like banking and other industries. Nowadays, anyone can get, into cloud deployments or into infrastructure. It's pretty easy, pretty friendly. You have providers like DigitalOcean. That's like the best way to get into cloud ops, I would say, handling droplets, learning about load balancers, even things like Kubernetes, like container orchestration frameworks, like Kubernetes, actually the only one. There's a lot of information out there. I don't think it's something impossible. And obviously, I am a big fan of spreading the DevOps culture. I gave a talk called Deployment 101. It's actually deployment for front-enders, and I think this can only benefit you,
Oh yeah. Okay. So I like to think of finding the right role in technology as slightly more important than finding the right spouse. It needs to be a perfect match. So I try to ask people, for whatever role you're in, what sort of person might be drawn to the role? Like, obviously for development in general, if you like solving problems and you like logic problems, you like puzzles, then development probably going to appeal to you in a general sense. But what is it about the infrastructure and deployment aspect? What sort of personality traits, if people have, should they say, oh, maybe I should Google DevOps?
This is going to sound funny, but I think for DevOps, you need to be extremely patient, extremely calm. Like, you need to be so calm. Like, I don't know, if you know how to work under pressure, if you're cold-blooded, to handle situations, like that. It happened to me. After 15 years doing this job, I wiped an entire database for a university, in Argentina, and they were out for 4 minutes, the longest 4 minutes of my life. But somehow I actually picture myself flying out the window with the rest of the computers, sort of like my boss throwing me out, You have to be cold-blooded. You have to be very much you have to be a very curious person. And the problem-solving skills take a different level, you're really putting fires out. So if you like excitement, if you like the unknown, because it doesn't matter for how long you've been doing this, you will always find things that will puzzle you. Computers and devices react in ways that we can't foresee. So, yeah, if you like excitement, this is a good role for you,
That's good.
Agreed.
You have to be patient and calm. Clearly, I'm. That's why I've never been in DevOps because I have none of those skill sets. But since both of you are in DevOps, and that's an area that I'm not familiar with, for people that want to get into DevOps, what areas would you recommend them to start? What skills do they need to have? You mentioned like Kubernetes earlier and Docker and cloud and the automated tools that people use within the DevOps arena. What area would you recommend for somebody to learn how to get into it? Do you need a computer science degree? Do you need to go to a coding boot camp? Is it something you can learn on your own? And if they are starting to learn, what would you recommend as the path that they follow to get into DevOps?
Oh, that's a really good question. I really haven't seen a DevOps boot camp. Probably there are a few. This is something you can learn on your own. You sort of have a lot of I don't know. This is the dark side, you know, of the industry. It's the infra world. We are behind everything, you know, and a long time ago it wasn't as easy. Now you can, I mean, any DevOps course on Udemy will give you, you know, what you need to start with. It's good to have a coding background, because it's important to have some Bash, Python, or Java, or even Ruby knowledge. You know, it's good to have a little bit of programming. Node is a plus, but it's a good idea. Yeah, I'd say you don't need a computer science degree to actually be a developer anyway. I'm self-taught, actually. For me, curiosity and all the content in there, you know, online, make a difference. You know, I don't think there's actually a process to become, you know, SRE or DevOps. You know, I'd recommend Udemy. You know, they have some good crash courses on things like pipelines, integration tools, testing, Jenkins, Circle CI, Amazon Web Services, whatever cloud provider you choose, because there are many and they're very different. They also have some good introductory materials to start with.
Yeah. I would like to add, as someone who went to a web development boot camp, for our listeners who maybe did a web development boot camp and are fascinated by DevOps, go ahead and teach yourself how the internet works, because they don't really teach you that at a web dev boot camp. And when you find yourself at your first DevOps, you know, your first day at your new job, and they're like, so let's talk about what protocol were you, and you're like, what? I don't even know what that means. I would add that. But yeah, no, that's awesome advice. All of those are great starting points. I have to ask, and I'm not accusing. I'm just asking. What got you to go to Vue? I'm not saying it's bad or a betrayal. I'm just asking, what got you, no, seriously, what got you interested in on this path towards being, you know, the face of Vue to so many of us?
Cheers, thanks for that, man. That's huge, right? Well, you know what? I'd done some front-end development in the past, like your basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, and I fiddle around with other frameworks. But I have a friend who is also a mentor for me. His name is Matias Blayer. He's from Argentina. And he said, you know what, because I always said, well, I suck for front end. I don't have the patience to do this, you know. This is bullcrap for me. And he said, you know what, there's a friendly framework I'm very keen on showing you. It's called Vue.js. You should try it. And it was so easy. So easy. And I thought, well, if this was easy for me, and I've been always reluctant to do this, why not sharing this with the rest of the world? And that's how I got in touch with Jen Lupo and Fona, that she'd started Vue Vixen. So nowadays I try to be the face of DevOps and front end, you know, as a culture. You don't have to change your specialty if you don't want to, but knowing about the process involved in this business is actually a huge thing.
Absolutely.
That's great to know. I want to completely change over into another area from, you know, what you've talked about so far into DevOps and get into speaking. That's something that I've done. It's something that Valerie's done and that you've done it as well. And for people that are looking into getting into tech, even if they just are starting out, you know, or they're juniors, or even if they're senior levels, speaking is, I think, a great way of sharing what you know and what you've learned and being able to help out others. What how do you feel about speaking, and do you encourage others to speak?
Yeah, definitely. If you're toying with the idea, I'd say just do it. It actually it has helped me battle my imposter syndrome. That's something I deal with, on a day-to-day basis. And speaking has helped me help other people. And I'm the most surprised of them all. You'd be surprised how much you know when you actually explain to other people. um, I'd say it can be it can be a bit scary at first, but it's I don't know, it's something I really enjoy. Out of this world, you're in a position to show others what has made you get to the level where you are, or what tools actually make you happy, or how things work from a different perspective. And that's a much gain for me. I'm actually really clumsy. I'm in the spectrum, and I'm always panicking about speaking to other people, but this is something I truly enjoy. I'd say if you wanna try it, if you wanna try, just do it.
Solidarity. As someone who lives with a disability, it's kind of a joke in my house on nights that I speak because I spend all day upset, saying things like, I'm not going. I'm not going to do this. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I'm not going. And then I go, I do a great job. I'm super happy afterwards, and I shake hands and I make eye contact and I laugh and I have a great night. But my partner knows the minute I get home, it is time for elastic waist pants and give me a blanket and a sad movie and probably some booze. I'm just gonna have to defrag. So, for people who maybe are a little hesitant about that whole spotlight thing, um, how do you recommend someone get started if they're thinking about speaking? What is sort of your recommendation on choosing a topic, or how to apply to a conference? Like, where do you start?
I start asking for help. There are many support groups and communities, I'd say, and I'm going to throw a flower to Women Who Code and the girls in Atlanta. You guys have an awesome way to support people, encourage them. We also do it at View Vixens. We have a channel called Abstracts, and we help people sort of brainstorm what topics they could, apply for. I think that the secret to a good talk is to talk something about, something you like, something you master, and presented in an engaging way. All these languages are clashing in my mind at the moment. I speak a lot of languages, and English is not my first language, actually, believe it or not. Yeah, there's nothing better than talk about what you know. That's why all my talks, even when I do a View Vixens, or when I do a View talk, they're always related to my field of interest and my specialty, and that's how I make it work.
That's
I love
awesome.
that.
And thank you for giving a shout out to Women Who Code Atlanta. Valerie and I are both proud to be part of that. One of the things, if you're interested in getting into speaking, and we'll include that in the show notes for this episode, is there is a world, or I guess they call it now Global CFP Day, which was started by Kim Creighton, who is a member of Women Who Code Atlanta, and we will include links to that. So if anybody's interested in possibly thinking about getting into speaking, go to these events. They're held on and I don't know off the top of my head what day it is, but they're held worldwide, and there will be people there that have spoken, and they will help you write your very first CFP to apply to speak at a conference. So we will include the information in the show notes there on there. So we're getting to the end of our podcast for today, Diana. So what we wanted to do is ask you for a recommendation. The first recommendation that we want to ask you about is, what would you like to recommend for our audience on what would make their life easier, whether it be in general or for getting into tech? And it can be a training class, it could be a Netflix movie, it can be anything that you would like to recommend. So, what would be your recommendation for our audience that would make their life easier for getting into tech?
I'd say exercise, sports. I deal with a lot of stress. I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, and that has helped me sort of level myself, my anxieties or anything. Even if it's just going out for a jog, if you like running, or go swimming, um, sometimes we need a break from technology, and I found sports as my way to do so. Uh, it works.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. I might be a little bit biased, but I completely agree with you. Also a black belt in judo, so solidarity, sister. Um, so the second recommendation that we would love your opinion on, once you've done your computer science degree, your boot camp, your self-teaching, whatever it is that's gotten you on this path, we all have to face the dreaded technical interview, which can be really overwhelming if you've not done very many. So we would love to know your favorite resource or study aid or advice for preparing for that kind of interview.
Okay, this is awesome. Whoops. Not all people react equally to the standard. I had the chance to be really honest about this in my interview, and I did something that changed the way this company in particular interviews people. I'm not good at whiteboarding. I get overwhelmed and feel under pressure too much, I can't function with whiteboarding, but I'm really good at explaining processes. So I was faced with this interview at an office full of people. I had a computer where people were looking, in another states, and I had a big monitor behind me, and they were all looking. Shut down. And, at this point, I just said, you know what? I can't do this, but I can explain how this works and how I would do it. But I feel a bit under pressure. I think being honest is a good strategy. It won't always work the way it worked with me for this particular interview. But being honest and trying to find ways to showcase your skills and work. If whiteboarding doesn't work for you, show your repos, walk through the code you've made, explain things, come up with different ideas or views on how to do things. Be honest about your capabilities and your limitations. I think nowadays employers are actually, and even HR are seeing that you can't just, use the same process for everybody because we all have different skills and react differently. So because of this interview, now this company gives people the choice to either go through whiteboarding, a technical interview where they ask you a lot of questions, or you walk them through some of your best repos and talk about how you code things. So yeah, that's my advice. Be honest. Try to get the ball, on your court and control how you portray yourself in a positive way.
Very nice. Very
That's
nice.
very great information. It kind of goes off to what Steve Jobs always says: change the playing field. Don't make it the same. Change it to where you can take advantage of what your experiences and your skill sets. Because what I do, the coding interview may not be the best way of showcasing what I can or cannot do. And if you can change that into a playing field where you can showcase that, it's the best thing that you can do as part of the interview process. So great information. So we're getting to the end of our podcast today. Diana, thank you for being on our podcast. You've given our audience some great information on DevOps, as a great way of getting into tech, and showing you that you can use cloud, you can use the continuous integration, the continuous automation tools that you've talked about. And we will share links to that in the show notes for this episode. And then also being able to share what you know by going out and speaking. And, you don't have to be an expert in an area, but if you can clearly articulate it, speaking is a great way for somebody to get into. But great information that you've shared for us today on our episode. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you very, very much for being on our show today. And we will have links to everything in the show notes below.